So yeah, speaking of the chord progression, or speaking of chords, this progression here. So this song is in the key of A minor, but this main riff has like an F, E, F progression, or F major, E minor, F major progression. Now there is like an intermediary chord. So the song starts with an F major. That's an F major. I don't know what chord that is. I didn't look it up, but the more pertinent chord is this chord that comes right after it, which is the E minor. So you have F, some other chord, E minor. So that's a minor chord that they hit there, and then back to F major right there. And then we have this fourth section. So the fourth section is a chromatic buildup, which means that it's not necessarily in a key. It's just playing each note like up a half step, like da 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 da. So it's just playing the next note that's possible to be played. I'll come back to that chromatic buildup in a second, but regarding the chord progression itself, the F major, so in the key of A minor, F major is the Lydian chord. Lydian, from like a modal perspective, has this very ethereal, it's almost major key, but not quite. And so it's got this kind of ethereal, uplifting sound to it. Whereas E minor, in the key of A minor, E minor is dark and aggressive. From the modal perspective, it's Phrygian, which is one of the darkest modes you can have. It might even be the darkness. It might even be the darkest, depending on your thoughts on Locrian. I know non-musicians won't understand any of that. What I'm saying though is that this section here, because of the chords and the key that it's in, has F major, which is uplifting and ethereal, and then E minor, which is dark and aggressive. So what's interesting is that this riff itself is actually kind of bouncy and energetic. It goes back and forth between these bent notes, like, and then these like staccato quick notes. So and again like that, very like static sounding, but it's like those are bent guitar strings that are happening. So yeah, it's a cool contrast between this very fluid, energetic, like long notes, and then these super staccato, almost electronic short notes, the rhythm itself isn't too complicated, but it just has a lot of energy, and it's actually a lot of fun to play. I'm not going to play it right now, but like, yeah, it's a cool riff. The thing that's really interesting about this riff, though, or real quick before I get into that, what I wanted to note was that there is this nice contrast between how energetic and like how pumped up the riff sounds, but then the underlying chord progression is adding in these additional like emotional elements to it. So it's not just like on its face like a regular A minor riff. It's actually using these modal changes to give some more complex emotions to it than you might initially think. I'll probably talk about that a little more when we get into the theme, but just understand that there's more going on from a musical perspective than meets the eye. There's more than meets the eye. One thing that's really cool that the non-musicians might not know is that they're actually playing this on the guitar an octave up, much higher. And what they're doing is they're playing it up, but then they have a sound effect, or what's called a whammy pedal, where they are able to detune the guitar by an octave. So if you were to play the riff itself, it would actually sound like no, 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 no. But because they've tuned it down an octave with a pedal, it sounds the way it sounds, like burr, burr, burr. This is normally kind of a weird thing to do. You wouldn't normally down pitch this way, but because they've done it like this, it actually gives the sound of the guitars it gives the guitars a really unique sound, because they're playing these low notes, but they're playing it on very thin, higher pitched strings. And so they can get this kind of unique sound. That's how they're getting the sound. It almost sounds bubbly, like bow, 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 because the strings are thinner. They're going to pop a little bit more. They're going to, vibrate at a higher frequency, right? But then you're just bringing that whole thing down an octave, so you get all of that pop and energy and the warbliness of it, but then you still get the low element of it too. So listen to it and pay attention to how the notes themselves sound, especially the long notes, and how bendy and fluid they are. Like that wow, wow, like you normally couldn't get that sound from a low tuned string, but because they're doing it, I mean, that's being played on the G string, which is a thinner, not wound string. It's just a straight nickel string. I think it's nickel, right? No, it's not nickel. I don't know what material it is, but it's not a wound string, and wound strings are usually harder to bend like that. Regardless, pretty cool, a pretty cool creative decision that gives it a unique, energetic sound, but then also gets their like low chugs. Like you hear how low that burr, 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 burr. So they get like the best of both worlds. They get the energy, but then they get the low chugs, and it sounds all heavy and shit. Yeah. So then the last thing to note on this is you get this chromatic buildup. Honestly, I think this is probably one of the weakest sections in the song in general. It's just a little on the nose. This chromatic thing right here. And the guitar kind of cuts out there, so you can't really hear the guitar as well. But there is, because it turns into kind of a EDM buildup. Basically, the guitar fades out while the 808s and like synth sounds build up. Here, listen. Try to keep your mind on the guitar. Yeah. I don't know. It's just a little on the nose. It's a build-up. It's fine, and it's kind of cool to do in a rock song. It's again gives it like a little bit of levity, but I do think it's just a tiny bit corny. But it doesn't kill it for me.